You know a man truly doesn't value you when he asks you to be his fourth wife, but still expect you to do unpaid housework like a full-time employee without health insurance. I first met him at a birthday party. Not mine, but my mom's, held in Aunt Donna's backyard, where chipped angel statues stood around like forgotten extras from a church-themed horror film. The weather that day was scorching, like California had decided to punish anyone still wearing polyester. I was in a discounted Zara dress, standing by the cake table with a glass of barely there lemonade, when he walked in, like the lead character from a low-budget daytime soap. He had on oversized Ray-Bans and slick back hair that glistened like he just stepped out of a salon, where only men divorced 3 times dare return. As he made the round, shaking hands, I heard some uncle whisper, "That's Ted. He's in Rotary Club with Jen's dad." I didn't think much of it, not until he strolled over, raised his wine glass, and spoke in a tone that made me feel like the dessert course at a budget buffet. "You must be Linda's daughter? So young. What, 22? 23? I gave a tight-lipped smile, just polite enough to not be rude, but sharp enough to say, "Don't play that tired age-guessing game with me. I'm 25. Thank you very much." And I'd never seen a man look at someone like he was mentally assessing both resale value and long-term risk. I thought it was just a weird party encounter. But 3 days later, my mom called me into the living room with the tone of someone announcing either a job promotion or an incoming hurricane. "Ted wants to take you out for lunch." Just a chat. I almost choked on my coffee, spilling it down my leg. My mom went on like nothing had happened. Like setting your daughter up with an old friend from Rotary was the most natural thing in the world. I honestly can't remember saying yes. Maybe it was her eyes. Maybe it was because I didn't have time to say no before she launched into a story about how he once did charity work in Honduras. The truth? I said yes because I had no idea that just a chat with Ted would feel like a job interview for the role wife, complete with a 6-page PDF job description. Lunch with Ted didn't happen at some charming corner cafe or a candlelit Italian restaurant straight out of a Hallmark movie. No, it took place at a spot best described as upscale with a weird twist. A classic American steakhouse where most of the patrons wore watches bigger than their sense of subtlety. Ted chose a table by the window, like he wanted the sunlight to reflect off the gold ring on his right ring finger. A detail I only noticed after he adjusted his hand 3 separate times to make sure it caught the light, just as I looked over. From the very first minute, it didn't feel like lunch. It felt like an interrogation disguised with premium beef and overpriced dipping sauces. He didn't ask what I wanted. Of course not. Ted waved the waiter over, pointed at the menu, and said with that condescending tone only men over 50 seem to master, "Should have a medium rare ribeye." Young women usually go for that. I opened my mouth to say I was a part-time vegetarian, but closed it just as fast. Partly because I didn't want to turn the lunch into a debate about animal rights and alpha masculinity, but mostly because I was curious just how far he'd take this performance. And Ted did not disappoint. He launched into a winding monologue about the lonely life of a man who once loved deeply, in which each previous marriage had apparently ended because modern women just don't know how to keep a home anymore. I took a sip of water and tried not to choke on that sentence. Then, without warning, he placed his hand on the table, leaned in, and lowered his voice like he was about to reveal a national secret. "I'm not looking for fun. I need a real wife. Someone who knows how to care, how to step back, and how to know her place." I stared him dead in the eye. No blinking, no reaction, just waiting to see how far off the rails he was willing to go. And Ted, like a sitcom character with zero self-awareness, kept going. "You wouldn't have to work. I can take care of everything. All I'd need is for you to stay home, cook, keep things tidy, and greet me at the door when I come home. That's all." I smiled, but not the how charming smile he was probably expecting. No, this was the tight-lipped, nearly a silent kind of smile. The kind that, if he'd been even a little perceptive, he'd have known meant I was mentally drafting an outline for a future podcast titled Red Flags of Late Life Dating. That's when I started noticing everything. The way he summoned the waiter without ever making eye contact. The way he said, "Girls these days don't even know how to brew proper tea anymore." The way he glanced at my phone on the table like it was some kind of threat to his authority. This wasn't just a bad date. This was an audition, and the role I was being asked to play? The obedient fourth wife who stays quiet and wears slippers indoors. Just as the ribeye was set down in front of me, still sizzling, still untouched, Ted reached for his leather briefcase. Yes, a leather briefcase. Not a wallet, not a tablet. A full-on, courtroom-ready, divorce attorney-grade briefcase. He placed it on the chair beside him, unlatched it with dramatic precision, and pulled out a stack of documents, which he slid across the table toward me with 2 fingers, the same way someone might hand over the contract for a used car with questionable mileage. I looked at him, then at the papers, waiting, hoping. He'd follow it up with a laugh and a just kidding. But no, Ted was deathly serious. His voice turned silky, like a man pitching to a venture capitalist. I just believe in being clear from the start. No misunderstandings. I'm a man of responsibility. I glanced down, and, oh dear God, it was a homemade prenuptial agreement. No notary stamp, no legal letterhead. Just a default Microsoft Word logo sitting proudly in the top corner, like it was co-signed by Clippy the Paperclip. The contents? A 7-point list titled, in bold, all caps, Marriage Living Agreement, Voluntary Terms. I read each line like it was a freshman dorm rule sheet, except written by someone who never left the 19th century and had a controlling streak wider than Route 66. Clause 1. Wife shall not be required to work if husband maintains financial capability. Clause 2. Wife shall be responsible for household duties, daily meals, and shall not complain about said role. Clause 3. Wife shall not make individual purchases over $200 without prior consultation. Clause 4. Husband retains final authority on family direction, including residence and social relations. And it kept going until Clause 7, which I swear, if we weren't in a climate-controlled steakhouse with golden ambient lighting, I would have assumed I was on a hidden camera reality show called Marry Me or Else. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Ted reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a color-printed photo, slightly blurry, crooked, clearly printed on a first-generation Epson, and handed it to me like it was a promise of paradise. It showed a modest suburban house, trimmed hedges, maybe a porch swing in the corner. This, he said, would be your home. You'd garden, take care of the dog, maybe raise a child, if you choose to, of course. He emphasized if you choose to, like he was offering me autonomy, but his eyes screamed, but really you should want to. I sat frozen, not because I was shocked, but because my brain was still buffering the sheer absurdity of what was happening. Sitting across from me was a man who genuinely believed that proposing marriage to a woman nearly 30 years younger, under the terms of living like a domestic worker with a wedding ring, was reasonable. And the scariest part? It wasn't that he wrote it all down. It was that he thought I'd say yes. I didn't speak for the rest of the meal. I just cut into the ribeye like it was a contract, deliberately, slowly, choosing where to slice first, even though every bite, no matter how tender, went down like a brick. I left the restaurant without saying a word. In my head, there was only one sound playing on loop, the clink of Ted's wine glass tapping mine an hour earlier, like some twisted toast to a junior-level merger. When I got home, my mom was all smiles, asking, "See, good men are hard to find, right?" I nodded vaguely, slipped into my room, and opened my laptop. If Ted were a product, I needed to read the reviews. And oh, I found them on Facebook, on Yelp, even on a private group called Ex-Wives Anonymous. No joke, Ted had his own reverse fan club. A woman named Marie had posted 6 months ago, "If a man named Ted, formerly of Fresno, proposes to you and brags about his work with Rotary, run. Run the moment he starts talking about traditional women." I read the post twice. Name? Check. City? Check. Rotary Club? Triple check. Description of controlling and blaming you for not cooking daily? Bullseye. I clicked on Marie's profile. Her picture showed a woman in her 40s, curly hair, denim button down. I didn't know why, but I messaged her, "Sorry to bother you. Did you happen to be married to someone named Ted?" 10 minutes later, the reply came. "Let me guess. He offered you a contract too?" Marie told me about her marriage, not with bitterness, but with the kind of exhausted calm that comes from having survived something slowly soul-crushing. She married Ted when she was 28, just 3 years older than I was. At first, he was exactly like a version I'd met. Polite, financially stable, and tired of modern women who don't know how to keep a home. She said the first year was all promises. Just stay home, I'll handle everything. The second year became, what did you spend $400 on this week? The third, why isn't the vacuuming done yet? And by the fourth, she left with nothing but a suitcase and a stack of therapy bills. She even sent me a photo, no faces, just a handwritten card he once gave her. Marie, if you can't learn to submit, don't call yourself a good wife. I stared at the card, and for a second, it felt like I'd stepped off a cliff I almost convinced myself was a velvet carpet. And then, because life has a taste for irony, 3 days later, I ran into one of Ted's ex-wives at a grocery store of all places. I was in line, spinach and oatmeal in hand, when someone behind me said, "You must be Ted's new girl." I turned around and saw a woman around 50, slim frame, prematurely gray hair, sharp eyes. I nodded hesitantly. She smiled. That smile, I couldn't tell if it was pity or warning. Then she said just one sentence, the kind that chills you in places sunscreen can't reach. Don't sign anything. He treats women like trial versions, no refund policy. I went home, closed my laptop, locked my door, and sat down, not from fear, but because a strange feeling had begun curling inside me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even shock. It was amusement. Amusement that I almost believed this was something I should consider, just because my mom called it a stable man. But what's stability, really, when it's built on a trap formatted in Times New Roman? I didn't call Ted, didn't text, didn't email. I didn't need a proper closure. Because with men like Ted, every goodbye turns into yet another episode of self-victimization theater, and I had no interest in being cast as the villain in his badly written script. Instead, I folded the marriage agreement neatly, tucked it into an envelope, and slipped in a small card. No words, just a faint image of a runaway bride. And in the corner, a tiny sticker that read, "This position has been filled by self-worth." My mother asked why I wouldn't give him a chance. I just smiled, quietly packed my bags, signed a lease for a small apartment in the city, the one I've been dreaming about for 2 years. There's no balcony, no garden, no man promising to handle everything for me. But in that tiny kitchen, I get to decide what I'll eat today, or if I'll eat at all. And more importantly, no one is waiting in the next room, expecting tea at exactly 6 p.m., steeped just right. I don't need a stable man like Ted. I need a life that doesn't price tag my value by how quiet I can be or how well I cook. And as it turns out, that kind of freedom doesn't require any contract to be valid. I thought things with Ted were over. I chose to walk away. I chose silence. I chose freedom. But life has a way of circling back. Just when you think you've escaped, it shows up again in a handwritten letter. No joke, an actual letter. Faint yellow paper, purple ink, cursive handwriting like it belonged in a Civil War-era love story. It wasn't from Ted. It was from his third ex-wife, someone I'd never met, never even knew the name of. In the letter, she wrote, "I know you, not directly, but I figured you'd be the next. If you're reading this, it means you didn't sign. Good." I have no idea how she got my address. Maybe through mutual acquaintances, maybe through a support group. But the last paragraph stopped me cold. "If you still have the contract Ted gave you, scan it and send to me. Wife number 2 and I are preparing a case. We're going after him for systematic emotional fraud." And then, like the final punchline in a dark comedy, tucked into the envelope was a copy of the same contract I'd received. Same font, same layout. Except this one had a different name at the top. Monica. I sat there, stunned. Then I laughed. Not the happy kind. The kind you laugh when you realize you almost became the next iteration of a failed startup. One product, trial version wives. No warranty. No refunds. Looking back, I don't feel regret. I didn't walk away with a lesson like, learn to love yourself, because I already did. What I learned was this. Sometimes, saving yourself doesn't look like flipping a table or giving a big speech. Sometimes, it's as quiet as shutting the door, folding the contract, and mailing it back with a sarcastic sticker. Polite, subtle, but loud enough to let the control freak know. They no longer control anything. And if you're listening to this and something about it feels familiar, if you've ever met a Ted, not necessarily a man, but someone who thinks they get to define your worth by the role they think you should play, then congratulations. You've just escaped an emotional NFT collection no one should be investing in. This story isn't just about a man named Ted. It's about every distorted expectation society places on women, wrapped in words like stability and tradition. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight loudly, but to walk away quietly with your self-worth intact. Every choice you make is shaping who you are, not who anyone else wants you to be. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this story. If you've ever been in a similar situation, or found yourself standing on the edge between people-pleasing and self-preserving, share your story, not to complain, but to give someone else the strength they might be searching for. Don't hesitate to leave a comment. Share your experience, or even just write, I get it. And if you found this meaningful, consider supporting the channel with a like, a share, or a subscribe. You are the reason I keep telling real stories.